going to continue with our review of scenarios to address bias, microaggressions, and harassment. And so, what's going on here? Let's see. So for our agenda today, we are going to go to the last indirect strategy that we didn't have time to explore last week, and that is examining. And then we're going to start to transition into direct forms of intervention. And we're going to start with some nice light strategies, which I call the FYIs and the I statements. And then we're going to get into really direct calling in scenarios. We'll talk about sort of the do's and don'ts, some of the strategies for being effective. We're going to talk about how to support those who are being harmed. And we're also going to think about strategies. What's our end goal? What are we trying to accomplish? So when do we want to use the indirect strategies? When do we want to use the direct strategies? When are we really concerned about building relationships and sustaining relationships and strengthening relationships? And when do we just need change to happen, damn it? And when are we not concerned so much for the feelings of the person who's causing the harm, but we're more concerned about the people who are being harmed, and we need to just create an intervention that's going to be fast and effective? When do we want to protect the privacy and the dignity of the person who's causing the harm? And when do we feel like their misdeeds need to be put on full display? When do we need to publicize them in order for us to stop the harm and be effective and maybe even get a change in leadership? So we'll be talking about these, and just to give you a warning, there's no way we're going to get to all of this perfectly in an hour and a half. So this is something that's, we talk about how you have to accept non-closure in this work, and that this is work in progress, and hopefully we'll have many more opportunities to come back together to keep doing this work. So we've talked already about what microaggressions are last time, about how to start to analyze using the DEI lens, about recognizing the harm that it causes, and how to counter the bystander effect. So we're going to look at some other responses, how to sort of weigh out the pros and cons of each option, how to assess our ideal methods, how to find our way in when we're training people. We're going to talk again today about how you can use this, how you can use these tools. We actually have a full syllabus that I'm not presenting you today. We have a full syllabus about how we train people to become trainers. So I'm going to give you little pieces of it and talk to you about how you can use this when you're training recovery coaches. And then at the end, for those who would like to stay on, I do a healing practice that I've been working on for a while now. I work with a therapist who uses a specific method of healing for people who are healing pain and healing wounds and healing trauma. And I've been thinking about how to really specifically work that practice for healing racism and the trauma caused by racism. And so if anybody's interested in learning about that practice and seeing what I do and doing it together in community, you're welcome to stay on at the end, and we can do that together as a group. So last week we talked about the indirect responses. Who remembers what some of those options were? You could take yourself off of mute and just jump right out and speak.
This is Paul. You can focus on the positive point, that might be, underlying, and in hopes that everyone else will move forward.
Great. Do you remember the name of any of those specific strategies that we practiced last week?
Reframing.
Yes. Reframing. Yep.
Interrupting. Modeling.
Yes. Great. Good. So we talked about using the agreements, the community agreements, referring back to them to remind people to be kind and respectful and equitable and inclusive. We talked about reframing, which is restating through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. We talked about modeling and interrupting, so just nipping something in the bud quickly and redirecting or distracting in some way as soon as you realize something is about to happen. And then making a statement or engaging in behavior that demonstrates a more respectful or inclusive or equitable way of engaging. Well, today we're going to get to examining, which we didn't get to last week, and then we're going to start the direct methods. But the way you can remember this is with the acronym ARIME. So The indirect responses we talked about, they had some pros and some cons. What were some of the pros of why we use indirect responses? Go ahead and just unmute yourself and call out.
They were respectful of both parties.
Yeah, respectful, yep. What else? Anybody? All right, well, it's immediate and it demonstrates that you're aware of what's going on and that you're going to take a stand and you're going to engage in allyship in some way, but you're doing it in a way that's gentle, that doesn't blame, that doesn't shame anybody. It reduces the defensiveness. And so kind of it leaves an opportunity for people to make shifts in their behavior without feeling bullied or embarrassed into doing so. It allows people to sort of become self-aware and maybe even say, oh, you know what? I like what you just said. And I realize that's actually really different what I said, because I think what I said was maybe holding some bias and was kind of harmful. So let me try that again, right? So it kind of invites people to do better. Some of the limitations though is that, it's subtle. And so some people are going to miss those subtleties and you may need to come back then with something stronger, which we're going to do today. It doesn't name or address the root bias or acknowledge the harm or the sting of pain of that bias. And it might not be enough to stop that behavior from repeating. So what we're talking about is not doing just one strategy. We're talking about sometimes we might do multiple strategies. And sometimes we need to be strategic and think, okay, in this moment, I'm going to be most effective if I just model, right? I'm just going to model what I think is an effective way. But then after the meeting, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to the person who was harmed and say, I want to check in with you. And then I'm going to talk to the person who did the harm and say, I want to talk to you about what you said there. So it's not always just one or the other, but sometimes it's scaffolding them in an effective way. And so we're going to learn all these tools, and then you'll have a lot of options that you can choose from. So examine. Examine means basically you're going to look at a situation and you're going to talk about that situation and you're going to get others to consider this situation from lots of different angles without attaching it to the person or the people who are holding those positions. So you're depersonalizing it. So in this scenario, we have Kat, Paul, Zach, Mohammed, and Nia. And Paul starts off by saying, for Black History Month, let's bring in a rap group and serve up some good soul food. Kat replies saying, I don't like rap music. It's all a bunch of misogyny. And can we have some vegan food options? Now, Zach is thinking, I don't think this is supposed to be about your comfort. And Mohammed says, there he goes again. Every time we talk about Black people, it has to be rap music. Talk about stereotyping. And then Nia chimes in with, well, let's think about our goals for Black History Month. Who are we trying to reach? What are we wanting to message? So a little analysis here. What do you think is going on with this group? Let's talk about it through a DEI lens a little bit, all right? So let's talk about first Paul. Anybody want to give a guess of what's going on for Paul here?
Hi, folks. This is Angela. So Paul is the original gentleman who said, let's bring a rap group and serve up. Oh, that was Paul. I don't like rap music. Is that correct?
Paul said for Black History Month, let's bring in a rap group and serve up some good soul food.
So he wants to, I believe, he wants to represent his culture, which is very important to him, and that this is Black History Month, and this is what it's about, honoring this culture. Is that correct?
Yeah, so he might be thinking, look, this is my community, this is my culture, this is a celebration of it. That's what would feel good for me. Yeah. Okay. Anybody? Thanks, Angela. Anybody want to take a guess at what's going on for Kat? Let's do a little DEI analysis of Kat's comment here. I'm sorry, not Kat, Dana. Dana is my friend who's changed her name from Kat to Dana several times, but right now it's Dana.
Well, this is Blair. She's speaking from her experience. I mean, she perceives rap music from a language point of view. She doesn't, if I'm catching the right person, she's the one who wanted the mentioned misogyny and vegan options.
Yeah.
So she's personalizing it for her. And she's trying to be expansive by opening up, what she thinks is more options for food for other people. But she might be speaking, again, from her experience.
Yeah, so she's thinking that, okay, to be inclusive, we don't want music that she perceives to be misogynist, right? So that's kind of her experience that she's responding to Paul now. And she's saying, well, she wants some food options that meets her needs. And she's looking at it through her lens, right? And how might that be perceived by Paul? What's Zach picking up on there, huh? Anybody want to comment? Did I just hear somebody unclick? All right. Well, my sense is that Zach is sort of having an awareness. Well, maybe that's not our lane here as the white people in the room. Maybe we shouldn't be just immediately jumping in with what we think our needs are or what our critique is of what a Black member of our staff is trying to suggest here, right? All right. How about Mohammed? Anybody want to do a little analysis of what's going on for Mohammed?
He feels offended. They say, hey, y'all stereotyping because of the music and everything like that. So, he took it personal.
Well, what's wrong with rap music, huh? What's wrong with a Black person admitting they like rap music? What's the risk there? What's the conflict within this?
So this is Angela. We have numerous amounts of white rappers in conjunction with Black rappers, and probably every other culture out there are rapping. And they're making this about Black people only. And that's not an accurate statement.
And it's also about that the muses, obviously, when it first started, the language, the information, people always criticize it. And, now it has become a culture, right? Because we got to understand, it became a culture, some folks. So not all rap music is bad, but, they want to put everything all in one basket. And that's what he's having a problem with.
Let me ask you this. If there were a bunch of white people at the table and somebody suggested bringing in a folk group or another person suggested bringing in an indie band, would they be accused of stereotyping white people?
No, I don't believe they would be.
So back in January at the training, we talked a little bit about stereotype threat. Does anybody remember what stereotype threat is?
Yeah, is it when you feel pressure to live up to some standard, live up to some stereotype? Like there's, it's almost like a pressure on a person that when you're not operating within the box of a stereotype, you don't feel.
Yeah, Sarko, you're getting to it. It's like when you're part of a marginalized social identity group and there's all kinds of stereotypes, negative stereotypes. Sometimes people feel like they have to work really hard to prove that they're not those negative stereotypes. So for example, my partner is Black. That's actually my partner there, Paul. He was part of our focus group that does a lot of staging and acting for us when we sometimes do theater and skits. And he talks about sometimes when he walks into a room of white people, he immediately feels like he has to start talking about how he likes classical music just to avoid being stereotyped, just to prove that he's not what they think he's going to be. And in doing that, he sometimes denies things that are actually true to his heart or what he really likes, because he's afraid that other people are just going to see him as a stereotype, right? Me as a short woman, sometimes when I walk into a room and somebody like holds the door open for me, I'm like, I don't want them to think I'm like a feather. So I'll do things like offer to help move the furniture or something just to get them to see me in a different light, because I don't want to be perceived as this is like a delicate feather, right? So stereotype threat is when you feel like you have to like prove something to make people respect you or see you as an individual. So we see this as something that, you know, people of color have to deal with all the time, right? And so, you know, Muhammad here has this fear that like, oh gosh, here we are like playing into a stereotype, and right? And so what is Nia offering here that's different? Her comment is the final blue bubble.
I think she's opening up the conversation. She's trying to get back to what the goal is, as opposed to all those little specifics that come from each. Let's find the common goal that we're all working around.
Right. Nia could have actually gone around to each person and blasted them, right? She could have just gone off on Dana saying, yo, you're the white woman in the room, and really you're going to make this all about you and what you want to need for Black History Month, right? She could have gone off on Paul and be like, there we go, the danger of the single story, you know, like, yes, we're playing into a stereotype. Or she could have gone off on Muhammad, or there you go again with horizontal hostility, knocking Black people down for celebrating their culture, right? She could have actually personalized it against each of them because there was something probably to criticize. Yeah, she could have gone off on Zach, like, there you are, keeping your mouth shut as always, you know, like, when are you gonna, you know, be an ally or something like that. But instead, rather than playing into any particular one person's strengths or weaknesses or limitations or conflict, she just said, okay, let's examine what are our goals, what are the issues, let's all look at them and think of them together. And in doing that, nobody has to cling to their position. Nobody has to get defensive. Nobody has to, you know, fight to kind of prove that they're right or wrong, because now we're just looking at a bunch of issues and they're not attached to anybody. So this is a great strategy for de-escalating conflict, for really focusing on what matters, on what are the goals, on what are the issues. There's still always the opportunity after to loop back and talk to people about some of the individual issues. She could always go back to Dana and have a conversation with her, or go back to Paul, or go back to any one of them and say, I want to talk to you about that conversation that we all had together, because there's something that's sitting with me that, you know, I'm curious about, or that feels uncomfortable. Any thoughts or questions about this method?
We're going to switch interpreters, so just one quick second.
So Deborah, I have a question. Could this also be considered a way of calling people in without creating a conflict? Like, say I'm in the middle of training, would this act as a sort of calling in to say, let's reframe it the way
Angela,
needed?
can you wait till you ask your question so Karen Lassen can hear the question, because they're switching interpreters now, and Karen's trying to find the next person who's going to be interpreting.
Hi, Scott. Did you just join us, or were you here?
Thank you
I've been
guys.
here.
Thanks
Okay,
for saying
hi.
something.
I'm
We're all
realizing
set.
that I'm not seeing everybody. So I think, will somebody remind me when we take our break today that I'm going to do just a little attendance check-in, because I'm not even sure who's here. And then the interpreters will just give us a little okay when it's ready to start again with the presentation.
We're all set to go now.
You're all set to go? Okay, great. So Scott, you reminded me last time about the break. So let's say, what time did we start? We started at 10. Can you, Scott, at about 5 to 11, just signal me that it's time for break?
I'll be happy to do so.
And then would you remind me that when everybody comes back to do an attendance check-in? Because I'm not seeing.
Now you're asking a lot, Deborah.
I know, I'm demanding. Okay. So Angela, do you want to share what your thought about how you might use this?
So my question was, as I'm looking at the section of our handouts about calling others in, and so I wondered if Nia's reframing to bring everybody back around is also a sort of calling in strategy. Because, you know, one of the things is when we're in a vulnerable position, we want to keep the group together, we want to keep it cohesive, and keeping that in mind. So I just want to see if I'm on the right track. Is it a calling in strategy in a group?
So when we start getting into calling in, the woman who actually, the person who coined the term calling in, has this wonderful quote that I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but I have it in the presentation about really we need to use multiple strategies, and we need to be sort of flexible and nimble moving in and out of our strategies. So our goal, when you're working in your role as recovery trainers and you're working with recovery coaches and with people in recovery, our goal is to try to bring everybody along. Where our goal is to try to keep the groups respectful and peaceful and listening to one another, and really leaving everybody space to shift their perspectives and their awareness, and to realize that something you may firmly be holding on to today, you might realize next week, after hearing a bunch of people speaking and getting some new information, I think I want to shift my position. So by using multiple strategies and being a little nimble, we're creating different ways for people to communicate, to be open-minded, to be more empathetic. And so sometimes you're going to say, okay, we're starting off examining, but now I'm going to do a little modeling. And maybe I'm going to interrupt that right now. And maybe I'm going to reframe it, right? So we're kind of using all of these strategies as a way to support each other and ourselves in learning and growing. And always sort of coming back to, okay, like, you know, you might realize sometimes people are in conflict and they both have really good intentions. They're both really trying to do the right thing, right? And that's when it becomes painful, when you're in a group of people who are all fighting with each other and they're all good people trying to do the right thing and trying to solve a problem. So the more that we can distance it from the individuals and say, okay, let's think about our goals and then let's examine each strategy and see what are the pros and cons of each strategy. And maybe we can all look at each strategy one at a time and say, okay, what are the pros of us going with the rap band? Right? Well, what are the cons of us going with the rap band? Okay, let's take it through with each thing. Okay, well then, given all of these pros and cons, what might be solutions? Well, maybe we'll have 3 bands. Maybe one of them will be rap band, right? Maybe one of them will be jazz. Yeah, one of them will be blues. All different kinds of Black music we're celebrating, right? So by doing those strategies, it kind of gets everybody to buy in and to communicate without being in conflict with each other. So yes to all of that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
And you'll see that sometimes I'm going to give you definitions and then things are going to be a blend. Not everything is going to fit into one little box perfectly. So here's what I want you to do. How many people do we have on today? Marion, do you have an idea of how many we are? Because I'm not seeing all the boxes now.
It looks like we have, I think, about 15.
Okay, so can we do 3 groups then?
Okay, let me redo it because I did 4.
4, okay.
Let me reset it before we go in. It's going to take me a minute.
Sure, take your time. So I'm going to read through this. And do you know if we are expecting anybody to arrive late? Did anybody mention?
Paul Bowman did register, although he hasn't signed in. So I don't know if he's actually going to be attending.
Okay. All right. Well, if he joins, then we can just pop him into a box. So we'll have 3 groups. And so here's a scenario that I want you to try to use that examine indirect skill. So Lourdes is a graduate school intern. She's giving a presentation on policies and practices to make organizations safe places for women and non-gender conforming people with substance addiction disorders. And she says, I've interviewed over 100 women and gender non-conforming people with SUDS, substance disorders and addiction disorders, and to better understand their needs. So the recommendations that I'm offering you include a budget to support their implementation, and they're designed to make our spaces more inclusive. But then Amy replies, well, you didn't interview me. I'm fine with the way things are. I don't mind if there are more guys. And then Bob adds, I appreciate that Lourdes is trying to make a difference, but we're looking for gender neutral ideas. I don't think anyone is interested in reverse discrimination. So you've got Lourdes. She's a graduate school intern. She's doing her graduate work on how to make our programs and our organizations safe places for people who are women and gender nonconforming who have substance addiction disorders. And she's here giving her presentation, and now she just got shot down twice, first by Amy and then by Bob. Okay, you're in the group. You and your group can decide what's your role. Are you a facilitator? Are you leading the training? Are you just one of the people who work there, one of the people attending this meeting? But sort of pick what you want your position to be that makes sense for you. And then think about how can you use the examine tool. Your goal is not to criticize Amy. Your goal is not to criticize Bob. But your goal is to extrapolate, well, what are the issues and how can you present it in a way to get the group to examine the issues? All right. So I'm going to give you all, let's say, 10 minutes. And you can pop out and be with your group. You're going to get a little pop-up box. Just to remind you, you'll get a box from Marion that invites you to join your group. So you'll have to go ahead and click and accept it. It'll tell you which breakout group you're in. Please remember which group you're in. So when I come back and say, okay, group one will present. Each group decide on one presenter. So you can talk, you can discuss as a group, but then choose one presenter who will come back and present it to the rest of us. And so it's now 10:30. We'll come back at 10:40. Okay.
Deborah,
Yep.
it's Julia.
Hi, Julia.
Can you tell us the roles again that are we each supposed to have a role in this?
Let's do that. So let's have one person be the note taker and decide who will be the note taker and the presenter. If one person can be the timekeeper and sort of keeping track that you've got 10 minutes and making sure that everybody's getting a chance to address the issue. And if one person can be the group coach, and the group coach makes sure that one person isn't dominating, that makes sure that everybody has a chance to speak, that makes sure that different ideas are considered, and that you're actually practicing these tools that we're engaging in. All right. So one person's writing the notes and is going to present it. One person is keeping track of your 10 minutes. We'll go to 10:32 now. And one person is making sure that everybody has a chance to speak and be heard. Got it?
Yeah, so I heard you say 4 roles: presenter, note taker, timekeeper, and group coach facilitator.
I think the note taker and the presenter may have to be the same person unless the note taker has a way to get those notes to the presenter.
Great, thank you.
That might be too cumbersome, so we'll go with 3 roles.
Cool.
All right, everybody good to go? We'll invite you back at 10:32. Have fun. Hi, Marion.
Hi, Deb. How are you? Deborah, sorry.
How's the technology working on your end today? Is everything going okay?
Yeah. It's going well. I thought about doing 3 rooms and then I did it for 4.
We lost some time with working things out for the interpreters, so.
No, I was hoping Karen was I did let her know that they were gonna be on a few minutes early. So
Yeah.
I think we lost a couple people, Paul and Ileana. I think we lost a couple people since last week, just 2.
And we have 2, do we have 2 Pauls or 1 Paul?
Well, we have Paul Alves that's joined. And Paul, last week we had 2 Pauls. We had Paul Alves and Paul Bowman.
Okay.
All right.
So this week we don't have Paul Bowman.
Yeah, he registered, but he didn't sign in.
Ilana. Okay.
So I'm taking attendance now.
Is there anyone here that wasn't here last week?
I don't think so.
Okay, great.
Because Donna, Tulani, Sarko, I think everyone was here last week.
Okay.
Mark Muhammad. I was trying to extract a report to send to you this morning, but I don't think I can do the report until after the.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. How was your weekend? Did you get a little downtime?
Yes, Sunday I did. I didn't do anything on Sunday, actually. I cooked. I started cooking at 5 o'clock. But I was outside all day on Saturday.
It was so beautiful, wasn't it?
Oh, it was so nice. I went out at 11 and came in at 6. My husband kept calling me in. Time for dinner. I said, I got to finish doing this because it's going to rain tomorrow and I'm not going to be able to come back out. So either you eat without me or you hold. But it was beautiful. I had got a lot done. I cleaned out some of my flower beds. I'm planning on what I'm going to dig up next.
Nice.
So I'm propagating a lot of my yard.
I did some of that too. I was visiting with my family. You know, we've my family's in New York and I'm in Massachusetts, and we've all been, quarantined for 3 weeks and decided, okay, it's, it's safe to come back together. And my mom is elderly. She's 82 and she had her birthday.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And my sister's birthday as well is in 2 days. So we got together and made cake and planted flowers and vegetables.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, we're starting a vegetable garden because you can't find anything in the stores. Nothing. Everything's wiped out. Or we're just not getting it. I think it's going bad.
It's also grounding, I think, just being out, your hands in the dirt. It's such a nice
It
break
is.
from the news, right?
It's very therapeutic. I love being out in the garden. I did it years and years and years ago, and then when I had my boys, got away from it, because when they're little, you can't do anything.
Right.
And then over the last couple of years, I look at my neighbor's yard, who I became very good friends with, and she used to landscape with her first husband, and her yard is impeccable. So I just said, well, my yard can't look like that. So I started digging up. I go over to her side of the fence and measure it, and then come back to mine, measure it out, and she'd come over and help me or just sit. I said, don't even have to do anything. Just sit and talk to me. I'm happy doing it.
Yeah.
I think I lost one of my rose bushes over the winter, though.
I've lost a few. I've planted several. I went through a breakup when I bought my house.
Oh.
And I remember crying one day and saying, no one's going to buy me roses anymore. And I'm like, damn, I don't need anyone to buy me roses. I'm just going to
don't.
So I planted 4 rose bushes and 2 of them died.
Yeah, some of them, I have a pretty peach one, and I forget the name of it, but I kept the tag on it. And it was a more expensive one at Lowe's. It was $30, and I should have bought 2. And I looked at it, and I took a picture of it, and I walked away, and I said, I can't leave this here because it won't stay. Thank God I grabbed it, because another gentleman came in with his cart and grabbed 2 of them, and there was only 1 left after that. But that one's like a pretty peach color, so it will bloom dark, and as it gets older, I think the petals get lighter, I think. And then I had a bright yellow one behind it, and that's the one I think I lost. But I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to trim it down and see if it happens to come back. But you don't know.
Yeah.
And then I have a red one that I bought, 15 years ago, and it's got all kinds of red leaves on it, so I expect a lot of blooms from it. And then I have another little one. The name of it is Playboy or Cheerio.
Huh.
And it's very hard to find, as a matter of fact. I ended up getting it at the Christmas tree shop. You don't know what you're going to get. And I looked online, and I got onto one of these nursery sites, and they're charging $50 and up for rose bushes. It's amazing. But they're hybrid, so they're different colors. And I said, yes, I'm not paying $50 for a rose bush.
I know, some are outrageously expensive.
They are, but I found it on another site. I think it was $15. They said, I have to have it because I want to plant another one right next to it to see if it will help bring back the other one.
I feel guilty saying this, but I think what we're going to find is that a lot of things are going to be on sale really cheap because, these things are like, the stores are all closed and business is down and places are going under. And so I think, I hate to say it, but I think we are going to be finding some good bargains this spring.
Oh, it's so scary. I
don't know which businesses are going to survive this, I'm so afraid of I have a wonderful downtown in Northampton, Massachusetts. It's like, it's like a real sweet downtown community with cafes and artsy stores and little progressive things. I don't know what's, the bookstores, it seemed like everybody was just making it,
Right. Yep, I know. I'm in watching some of these people on the news with the small restaurants. They're like, they can't get the produce and the food to cook. Never mind. I mean, and they can't bring their staff back if they're opening 25% of the time. They're making more money on unemployment.
Yeah.
So it's scary what this thing is, the effect of this whole virus.
I know, and I think about like in our area here, there are a lot of migrant farm workers that get brought in every year from places like Trinidad, and there are folks from the Dominican Republic that come and work on the farms. and they're not given benefits, they're not given health insurance, they're not given sick days, and it's just, and they're not even given the protective gear. And that's one of the things that's really frustrating. It's like, I feel like, wow, they're just being so exploited.
Right. Why aren't they being protected like anyone else would be?
Yeah. I know in Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren proposed a bill sort of requiring all businesses to do a whole range of things for the frontline workers, make sure they all have health insurance, protective gear, sick days, family leave, all that sort of stuff. I don't know if that's going to pass or not.
I forgot to pause the recording.
It's set on a 60-second notice for coming back. Yeah. Good. Hello, everybody coming back. Welcome. Is Windia here today?
Oh, Windia didn't sign in.
I'm not seeing her.
No, she's not. And I talked to her yesterday and I reminded her and she registered.
Okay. And there's Scott and our interpreters. Okay, good. And so let's see. Is everybody back?
I think so.
Okay. Mutzing Blair.
Hey, I don't know if Karen made it back. Can we please wait? Oh, she's here. Okay, thank you.
Oh, there's Blair. Okay. And there's Tulani. Okay, good. Looks like everybody's back. All right. Hi. So let's start with group number 1. Who is in group number 1?
Where is everyone?
Somebody needs to unmute
myself,
themselves.
Blair, Tulani, and Mark. Blair is going to present.
We decided Mark was actually going to present.
Oh, excuse me. Pardon me.
No worries. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, they they decided at the last minute, but it is what it is. Okay. What am I doing? How might you examine the situation? Well, the first thing I think we're looking at to reframe it and give it another, get everybody on the same page. I know people coming with their own thoughts, injecting their own ideas and stuff like that. But if we can get them focused on what this meeting is all about, there's some of the things that they injected or their biases that they came with. Yes, you could address it in the meeting, but once I'm trying to look at this whole scenario. So I'm just brainstorming right now. Sometimes I don't address things that somebody has to somebody says. It's like refocusing it. People come with their own thoughts. You'll be there all day trying to address what somebody says, unless it's something just way out the door, way out the water or something. But where I'm looking at this whole scenario is just rephrasing it. Let's look at these particular goals we're trying to address and see what we come up with. So,
and Brother Mark, we also talked about before reframing, possibly just asking questions to just get a sense as to, is this what I heard you say?
I'm sorry, Tulani, would you ask the questions to Lourdes or to Bob and Amy?
I think that we would ask to Bob and Amy just to make sure that we're hearing them clearly, because I think Lourdes is pretty clear.
So can you give us some examples of what might be some questions that you would ask to Amy and Bob?
Well, if I'm hearing you correctly, and then because, in our group, I think it was Blair that may have, or I can't remember, we talked about, well, did Bob come across as being dismissive? Well, we don't know if Bob, it sounds like he could be dismissive, but we won't really actually know unless we kind of get a sense as to what his intentions are. What is it that he's really trying to communicate? And so I think that asking questions even before going to the reframing is so important, because we could be reframing something that's completely our own projection.
Mm-hmm. So trying to first understand what he's saying. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Super. Anything else from group 1?
Well, they both seemed that they were Amy as well as Bob, and they weren't as open-minded to what was presented by Lords.
Uh-huh. It's always an interesting dynamic when you have somebody of the same social identity group trying to silence somebody who's trying to be more equitable for people of that social identity group, right?
Yes.
What does that feel like?
Being silenced?
Yeah, I think there's a kind of I find there's a film out now, a new documentary about Phyllis Schlafly, how she was so involved in trying to shoot down the Equal Rights Amendment. And there's a particular, I think, kind of feeling of betrayal and disappointment when somebody of your own social identity group is taking the charge in trying to prevent your social identity group from having equity.
Oh.
Right? There's an interesting dynamic. And then people can sort of say, well, I'm just going to follow that person of that social identity group. Amy's a woman. Why shouldn't we listen to Amy rather than Lourdes, right?
Yes, got you.
Yeah. Okay, let's hear from group 2. What did you come up with?
Hi, everybody. We really just tried to redirect the conversation and around what are the goals that the intern is trying to present, and to make space for the intern to share about the goals and opportunity to, I guess, to consider bringing the recommendations to light. And we didn't dive too deeply into people's perspective, but more we focused on the solution and making the space for us to get back on track and give the intern a chance to present rather than getting off task with focus on other things. Anybody else in my group want to chime in?
I think the only other thing was that it was difficult for us to remember exactly what the scenario was. And I even forgot that it was only women. And so we were wishing we had the scenario with us. And by the time we said hello, we only had like 6 minutes left. And so we did it quickly, but it was difficult to do it without having the scenario in front of me. I don't know, maybe, I know that Scott and I said we both could have used it. Thank God Karen's memory was much better than mine.
And mine too.
We're trying to figure out how do we get Google Docs or some sort of a folder. I've asked the Zoom folks, is there some way they can create like a folder within the program that people can open up when they're in their groups, and I have to leave Zoom to go to their email to see the PowerPoint?
So here's a quick workaround. I don't know if other people with our smartphones, I've been pulling up the slides on my phone so that at least, again, just it allows me not to have to shift focus when I'm in this screen sit. So it's just a workaround if we don't have a document.
And Deborah, you can create a live document while we're doing it, and you can still see everybody. So you can create a Google Doc that is live, and we can still see it, and we can still work on.
Who's talking right now? I don't.
Alex.
Alex. Okay. I'm going to reach out to you because I want to find out a little bit more about how to do that, but I don't want to take up this time. But if it's okay with you, I'd love to reach out to you and get some tips on how to do that.
Right.
Thank you.
Lastly, an easy fix would be just to copy this and place it in the chat box, and then we can copy it and put it in our small group chat box.
So you can see the chat box when you're in the breakout group?
Yes, but we have to create a new chat box. So if you were to put this thing in before you divided us up, we could all copy it. And then when we get into our new small group, we could paste it.
All right, let's see if I can do that for the next one. All right, so coming back to group, I want to give you feedback. So great. So the goal of examining really is to not necessarily focus on individuals or detractors, but to what are the big issues, what are the big picture things that we can all start to look at together? What are our goals here?
Did we hear from group 3?
Nope, we're going to do that in a minute.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I like that you sort of thought about how to bring it back to Lourdes. What is she proposing? What are the goals here? And I thought that was nice. And so what you might want to do though is think about then next steps, like maybe after the meeting you do want to talk to Bob and Amy and sort of understand their perspective more, as the first group said, because maybe you're not hearing it right, or maybe you're misunderstanding it, or maybe you're assuming that they're meaning something, but maybe it just came out that way. Maybe that's not exactly what they meant, or maybe it is, and maybe that's something you want to address with them, right?
Thank you, Deborah. And just a friendly reminder, we have 5 minutes to the break.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. So let's have group 3 go, and then we'll take our break. So who's in group 3?
Okay, so it was Paul, Sarko, and Deanne and Diana. So what we came out with, first of all, we acknowledged that Lourdes had really worked hard to get all this info together. Bob wants to move forward and be exclusive to everyone. And we wanted to, how can we include everybody, make it hard work? First of all, we acknowledge that Amy had a point, and we apologize that if she felt that we didn't include it. But what we do is we threw it back at the group and say, hey, so we want to acknowledge this. Let's process as a group what, if anybody felt any difference or there's more information that we can gain that, we're not the experts. We just hear guiding information. And that's what we usually do in a facilitating group. We throw it back at the group and say, okay, so let's talk about this. Let's process that and make sure that we include the minorities in the group if they felt any certain kind of way that, that was never our intention. It's just more about, hey, we gathering information, we trying to understand. And if we miss something, help us understand that.
I heard a lot of humility in that approach, a lot of humility of not addressing it as we're the experts and we're going to tell you what's going to happen, but let's make this a process and recognizing that it may take time, but at least it'll be an inclusive process.
Right.
I also heard that you approached Amy with a gentle acknowledgement and apology that her input wasn't included. That's always an interesting dynamic, that sometimes people who are trying to make progressive social change avoid the people that seem to be blocking it. And sometimes that seems like a really smart strategy. But sometimes in the end, that can be harmful because then that person could say, well, hey, I wasn't included in the process. And so it does take more time and work to include people in the process who are going to be the detractors and are going to have the walls up, right? So, but it sounds like you offered a process for how do we engage with everybody to talk about what we're trying to do here. So each group brought some really great ideas and some really great perspectives about how do we engage, how do we talk to people, how do we look at what we're trying to accomplish here, right? And I heard different people sort of layering it in different ways, but I do want to make clear though that this is one of those scenarios that really works well with a part 2, which is a direct conversation, which we're going to get into after the break. So why don't you all take a little time, go to the bathroom, have something to drink, and let's come on back at 11 o'clock. Does that work for you?
Yes, and sorry, Donna, for saying the name wrong.
Hi, Alex. Claire's gone. Everybody's gone. Hi, Paul.
Hello, buenos dias.
Buenos días. ¿Cómo estás?
Well. I want to say when we went to the breakout, it allowed us to chat. So Deborah, maybe this is helpful. It allowed us to chat within like the 4 people, on the chat box. But when it went back to the main screen with everyone, it wasn't allowing me, maybe it's because the box was still open.
No, what happened was that I was on my phone and then I turned into my computer. So when I leave there to there, it takes a minute for the system to recognize that I'm back in the system. So I was in my phone doing the group, and then I signed into my computer. So at the beginning, that's why you say, oh, I can't see you. And I say, I'm in the system. So it takes a minute for them to go back and recognize me.
Right on.
Hi, Ange.
Hi, Julia. Good morning.
Good morning, my darling. How are you?
I am well. I am very well today.
Good. Tomorrow we look forward to a beautiful day, and considering where you sit, that's going to be wonderful. Looking out at the ocean.
Julia, the other day, was it Saturday? We had that beautiful weather. Oh,
unbelievable.
I had my hands in the soil all day long.
Good for you.
Oh, it was so restorative.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Paul, how's your son?
He's he's a handful. He's funny. He loves animals, so we got all these animal and birds, and he's just so funny. He's really he's just making me laugh a lot, which is really cool.
Can you bring him and show him to us during lunch at some point?
I probably can. He has his class now, like we do homeschooling.
Okay, good.
So like one day a week, like the grandparents, do a class with him over Zoom, and then we have our music class. That's Thursday, so we try to find like a schedule, But yeah, he's like he's big.
Yeah, good. Alex or Paul or anybody, you see how Deborah has a photo or picture and Marion has a picture? I need to learn how to do that. I tried looking at the all the different areas at the bottom, and I didn't see anywhere that allowed me. There's a place where it says choose virtual background, and whenever I try to choose a virtual background, it's like you lose me. See?
I haven't figured out the virtual background piece, but the picture might be. I haven't done it yet myself. Alex has a handsome picture on his, but I think it's in the when you sign in to your own account type of thing.
Yeah.
They might recognize that you upload your picture. I think
it only takes certain pictures, and that's why some of them work and some of them don't. Like you see Marianne, she has one and it works for her. So I think it's just
They have to be a certain size.
exactly.
They can only be 400 megapixels. That's the largest is 400 megapixels. So I had to change the size in order to use the picture.
Right.
But why can't I use the virtual pictures that come?
Like she said, you have to. It's kind of like it's too much, so you have to kind of resize it. Like you make it smaller.
No, these are the ones that are already on Zoom.
Right. What Julia wants to do is have the background behind her, but still see her. The background is hiding her, and she wants to avoid that.
You can see you. There's a shadow.
I just noticed. It's her hands.
It looks a little like that movie, The Invisible Man.
I know, huh?
Oh wow, Alex, you look like the Invisible Man.
Because if you look at it, it has to be more green. You have to play with it. So
I don't know what that means. It has to be a green screen.
Yeah, you see, a solid color video background is required. Green color is preferred. It'll tell you. It'll tell you exactly what you need.
Yeah,
to
but Marion, where are you, Marion? See, Marion has a background. Do you have a green screen behind you, Marion?
No, that's my blue drapes behind me. That's a picture that I took at Niagara Falls.
Well, that's my point. Exactly.
I imported it and I just resized it to 400 megapixels.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have you walk me through this offline, Marion.
Okay, I'll try to do that. I don't know about the backgrounds that are already in there. I
want to do what you did. I want to take a picture from my pictures and
it's easy enough. You just bring it into whatever photo editor and you go into the pixel size and type in 400, save it. And then
sounds very simple.
It's just a few steps. There's 3 steps. It's an easy process.
Oh man, that's why they have a saying in recovery: keep it simple.
You know why Julia is saying that,
right? Like, roar.
That was great.
Actually, you know what we all need? We all just need a teenager or younger to come and explain all this. Tell us where everything is. They are like whip smart when it comes to all this.
Listen, there's a lot of things you can do with Zoom. You know, there's a lot of, you can take some small courses. Like Udemy, they have like a $15 course, and it teaches you a lot of different tricks of how to do Zoom with the Google Documents. You can do virtual chairs. I mean, there's a lot of things. It's just, you know, this is different for everybody. So,
yeah.
If I could add, the way I added a picture to mine was I just made my Zoom account with my Google account, and it used my Gmail's photo for this account. So you could try that too.
That too.
It seems that Deborah sent us something in chat, calling in templates.
Yeah, if you were to copy that, Julia, and we get into a group, you can paste it, but we're probably going to be in the same group again, so I copied it, and when we get in the small group, I'm just going to paste it.
Thank you. I'm so happy to see your faces and to hear your voices. I'm just...
Yeah, I love these trainings. The last one went by so fast. I'm like, it's over? I felt like we got started. I'm desperate for socialization. Like.
I know. What time are we supposed to be back? 11:05?
11.
11.
11. We're due to come back.
Okay.
2 minutes ago.
My electrical wiring blew, and my heat shut down. And the guy that came to fix it, I went all day yesterday and all night without any heat.
Oh.
And he came at 7:15 this morning and fixed it. Turned out he was in recovery. And so it was really wonderful just hanging out with him. And, you know, we both had our masks on, and we both stood at the front door going, virtual hug, virtual hug. Because normally we would have hugged each other as complete strangers an hour before he came in. And so it was just wonderful having the guy come that was in recovery to fix my heating system.
And I'm glad you must be feeling warm now.
Much better, thank you. Much better. Last night was like, it went down to 50 in the house. It was really, really cold. Yeah, it was really cold.
Okay, folks, let's come on back together. And we're gonna get into presentation mode. All right, so when we're wanting to have a direct conversation with somebody, there's a way that we can do what Nia and I jokingly refer to as direct light, which means that we are going to address somebody directly and refer to something that they said without actually pointing to what they said. So making an I statement or giving them an FYI is a direct response to what they've said without actually criticizing them.
Hi, Deborah. I was asked to remind the group about taking attendance.
Oh, thank you.
And I want to role model an I statement.
Marion, are you able to do that?
Marion's been doing it already.
Oh, she is. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, great.
I have taken attendance.
I think Karen is having a hard time finding me, I think.
Okay.
Okay, now, all right. She got me.
All right, so making an I statement. Without criticizing the other person, use an I statement to explain how you see the situation, how it forms your choices. So yesterday, I got a phone call from a friend who was telling me how she doesn't go to the grocery store. She gets our local grocery store to deliver to her. And she was surprised that I was on my way to the grocery store. I was talking to her from the car. My partner was driving and I was talking with her. And what I said to her was that, yes, I was aware that that grocery store made deliveries. And I'd spoken to some of my friends in the disability community who are blind and who are wheelchair users who've always depended on that service, who've said that they've been having a hard time now getting deliveries because everybody else is now calling for delivery. And so because, you know, I understand that it's frightening and that there's a risk involved with going to the grocery store, but I feel like it's really important to save that service for the people who need it the most. And so I just wrap myself up. I practically bubble wrap myself, and I go to the store and I come home and I change out in the backyard and I wipe everything down with bleach wipes to be safe. But that I really feel like, you know, for me, the most responsible thing to do is to make sure that the people who can't get to the store can get that service. I didn't tell her that she was wrong. I didn't tell her that she was being selfish or irresponsible. I just said, this is what I'm doing. And guess what she said? Wow, I hadn't thought of that. Geez, I'm so glad you pointed it out, because yeah, you're right. You know, I am able to actually get to the store and I could do all that stuff that you're doing. So I think maybe I'll do that in the future. I didn't have to criticize her at all. I just made my own I statement and I let her do whatever she wanted with that. That's an opportunity you can use when you feel like the stakes maybe aren't as high, or you feel like it isn't as urgent or immediate, or you want to at least give the other person an opportunity. Let them see, here's another choice, here's another way to look at it, and then maybe they'll do the right thing. If they don't, you might want to go to the next piece, which is sort of similar, which is an FYI, sharing a fact. So if I had some data, I could say, which I didn't have in the car, but I could have looked it up afterwards, this is the number of people that prior to the coronavirus were using the service. And I called the grocery store and I found out that because there's been an 85% increase in demands for delivery, now a lot of those folks aren't getting it anymore, or something like that. Sometimes just by presenting a piece of data, it can also lead to a change in behavior. Again, this doesn't involve pointing your finger at them or criticizing what they're doing. You're just giving them a fact. They may make the shift just with that fact. If they don't, you can go on to the next step. But this is an option when you're working with somebody that you feel like you don't want to offend, or they might be a new relationship, or somebody you're wanting to build a positive relationship with, or you're aware that this is somebody that's in a fragile state. They're dealing with a lot of hardships right now. So maybe this isn't the time to start criticizing them about certain aspects of their behavior. Maybe they're doing a lot of other good work, right? And you want to be able to recognize it. So this is sort of your gentle way in. So we're going to talk about, last week, some people asked some great questions about calling in versus calling out. So I would love to hear just some thoughts about what you think the pros are first of calling in. So just starting with, people can all unmute yourselves now. If you could just start calling out, what do you think the positive things are about calling in? And we talked last time in January about our training about calling in is actually inviting somebody to be more aware, to be more compassionate, to be more empathetic, to try to engage in a dialogue rather than, yell at them for what the mistake is that they're making and what they're doing wrong. What do you think the benefits are of the calling in?
People might feel less defensive if we have this conversation in private rather than in front of a group of people.
Great, less defensive.
It allows you to communicate and come to some type of conclusion, hopefully.
Right, so have a conversation and maybe have some resolve at the end of it. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. What else?
Sorry.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, forget it. Go ahead. I got discombobulated.
All right. How about calling out? What are the benefits of calling out?
You guys.
Maybe you can mute yourself for the moment. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah.
You'll get to actually address, that one point and address the person and address yourself at the end of the day, really, because you're actually giving voice to what might be inside. And if you do that in a positive, way, it can be very productive for everyone.
Yeah.
Does calling out mean that you do it in front of other people?
Yes.
Okay.
I think one way, if you just make it a general statement, like it's part of our comfort agreement to support.
Hi, bendito, Angela.
I'm sorry, someone was talking?
Scott.
Scotty.
Go ahead.
It can be, you can just make a general statement, like returning to like the comfort agreement or working agreement or brave space agreements, and as a way of getting a message, reinforcing a message across. without having to pull someone aside and having that private conversation, because that private conversation might go well or not well.
So calling out might just be like, hey, we agreed in our community agreements that we're gonna respect each person's social identity. Like, yeah, so just coming back to reminding of what the rules are, yeah.
And I think it all depends, how the situation happens. Sometimes it calls for a calling in, and then sometimes it calls for a calling out, because if it has happened more than one time, then sometimes you need to address that. But it all depends, you know what I mean? If it's a one-time thing, then you know what, I'm just gonna call it in, we're gonna use the group and things like that. But if it's just the same person that's being very disrupted, then obviously with love and care, then we go to the norms and say, hey, I know, or maybe just take that one, hey, let's take a 5-minute break, kind of diffuse the situation at that point. So it all depends on what's really happening, what's being said.
So yeah, so there's really, there's reasons for each, right? So if you are in a situation where there's imminent danger, and I've done this, I've been on a train and I've seen a man going to grope a child, and I screamed on the top of my lungs, hey, I see what you're doing, get the hell away from her, because I want other people to be aware. I want the group's attention. I'm not going to take on this person alone. I want other people to know what's going on, and I want this kid to know that I see it and that they're protected, that everybody's going to step in and do something, right? There are times when high-powered people are not people that we have a direct line to, right? We don't have a way to sit down in a room with Donald Trump and speak to him gently. And after periods of repeated behavior, we might feel like, okay, there's been enough repeated decisions and behaviors that tell us that calling in isn't going to work, and we don't have the opportunity to do it. So maybe all we can do is in social media and in blogs and in newspaper articles, call out, right? But we also know that calling out can lead to malicious attacks. We know that if we have somebody that's new to the group and that's here because they care and they're trying, if we start calling them out, they might feel shamed and humiliated and embarrassed and silenced, and we might lose them. If we're at a meeting with somebody who's like a new director of an organization and they have the ability to do really good stuff and to collaborate, but maybe there are certain issues that they're not aware of. Maybe that there are some things we need to bring them along, and that's going to take some work. But if we alienate them right away, we might be, cutting off our nose to spite our face, right? So calling in is a term that was developed by somebody, and I am sorry, I don't know how to properly pronounce this name. I think it's Ngak Loan Tran, who said that it's a less disposable way of holding each other accountable. And I like that, less disposable way. We don't treat people like we're just throwing them away. We're treating them like they matter. We're glad they showed up. We're glad that they're here at the table. And we recognize with humility that we're not all perfect, that we're all really stronger in some areas, and maybe there's some things that we haven't been exposed to, or that we're taught in a certain way that leads us to have a bias now, but that we're here and we care and we're trying to learn, right? And so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said it very simply. She said it's to educate and heal. So it invites dialogue to consider multiple perspectives. It encourages empathy. It leaves space for exploring impact and intention, because sometimes we find that people actually had a reasonable intention, but because of their lack of awareness, they didn't realize that their way of going about it was causing harm. So it invites people to shift behavior, and it basically values the relationship, the personal growth, and it's modeling respect. And it allows you to wear your social justice educator hat, knowing that some seeds take time to grow.
Deborah, this reminds me of giving feedback to someone. All the trainings I've done in the past around giving feedback. And you have to be thoughtful. You have to, be humble. You have to be, encourage empathy. There's a whole piece around doing that. And I have to tell you that most of the experience that myself and others have had around doing that, people get defensive. Even when you're doing it with love and respect, and you're taking your time and you've been thoughtful about it, nobody likes to be called in or out, but in particular, nobody likes to be even if you do it, you know, going around the mulberry bush, people still react negatively most of the time because people are not used to receiving critique and or feedback and or being called in on something that indicates that they're doing something either wrong or different, or that there is another way to do it, or that there's other information that they didn't know. It really doesn't matter. My experience has been that most of the time people end up trying to defend whatever it is you were trying to help them understand could be done differently.
I appreciate you saying that. And we're going to look at a template to try to think about how we can engage in that in a way that uses language that doesn't back people in a corner, that seeks to listen and understand the person we're talking to, and to also recognize they may still feel embarrassed and defensive, and to let them know that that's okay. And one of the things, Julia, that I do is that sometimes I will share people that, you know, I had to work through that too. You know, I used to engage in that form of bias. One of the things I will share with people is that when I was a teenager, I was really homophobic. I grew up in a town where everybody, the kids were all say really derogatory words about people who are gay, to just as an insult to anybody. And so I did that. I was really homophobic. And I will share, you know, and I share with people like, this is how I came to understand why that was so hurtful. And this is how I had to work with it myself. And this is how I kind of moved through it. You know, there's always the punchline, which is I got a crush on a girl, and that kind of wonked me across the head. But sometimes and you'll see in sharing our process for calling in, we can do it with humility to recognize that we're all learning and that we've all been raised in a country. If you grew up in the United States, we were raised surrounded by bias, and that we all are learning and trying and working through it together. And sometimes kind of sharing your own process can help people feel more open. And the process that we're going to do a practice at the end, a compassion practice for healing racism, and that kind of addresses that as well.
Karen,
So
Deborah, thank you for sharing your experience. And Karen Lassen has a question, and
sure.
Paul has his hand up as well.
Thank you.
So I wanted to share something that really that would really be an example of calling out, I guess. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure exactly here. I'm gonna let Karen know, actually. I think she's trying to voice this, but she's muted. One moment, we're gonna let her know that she's
One
muted.
person was can you hear me?
Okay.
Want me to talk louder? Are you okay? Okay. So I was in a meeting, and one of the people in the meeting became very aggressive towards another person in the meeting and was really publicly humiliating that person about something that had happened in front of everyone. And I felt that that was an immediate response of calling out and stopping that, because it would have caused tremendous disruption if I allowed the person to go ahead and talk. But at the same time, I valued that person's participation and wanted to keep that person there. It was a crazy feeling of wanting to be protective of the whole group and protective of the individuals. Many of the people in the group were trauma survivors, so it was a highly triggering situation. So I ended up kind of reframing, saying, oh, wow, why don't we take a pause, like a sacred pause, and just breathe here and, you know, let the group have a chance to process this. And I just interrupted the whole conversation. The question I have is that the group ended. It was a Zoom meeting, obviously. Nobody's in person anymore. When you have to call out somebody, do you recommend it following up with a one-on-one with that person?
Yeah, so this is a really great question, and we could do just a whole session on this, Karen, about how to facilitate meetings when this kind of a thing arises. I've been in, I can't tell you how many meetings where I've experienced that myself, and this is something that we actually train trainers on how to handle what happens when a moment arises, and how to consider, is it appropriate to basically pause from the agenda and give attention to what this issue is that's arising? Or is it more appropriate to create another opportunity to discuss that issue? Sometimes if you take a pause in that moment to address it, it might actually sort of hijack the whole meeting, the whole purpose of the meeting, to address something that wasn't even what the meeting was supposed to be about. And maybe you were meeting about something that was really urgent, where decisions needed to be made that day during that 2-hour block, and now suddenly that 2-hour block is going to address a microaggression. And so this can be really challenging, right? If you decide in that moment, like, you know what, this is really important, and I care a lot about wanting everybody to feel comfortable and safe here, and we have some decisions that we really need to make. We have this 2-hour block, and we're responsible, and we've been given this task that we have to do. So what I would like to suggest is that we stay at the end of the 2-hour block, those of us who are able to talk about what just occurred. Now, you might have some people who just stand up and walk out, and who say, forget it. If this meeting is not a safe space for me, I'm going to walk right out. This is one of the reasons why it's very important for groups to start off with community agreements, so that you can set up some standards for language and for how people communicate. This is one of the reasons why it can be really useful as a group to go through diversity training together, so that there is shared language and shared concepts and some trust built, so that everyone can say, okay, that person just said something really hurtful, but I've worked with them. I see that they have good intentions. I see that they're trying, but they're new to my social identity group, and they're still learning about some of these things. So I can hold off and wait 2 hours and sit down with them and with the facilitator to discuss this, because I know them and I know they're trying and I get it that they're new. So I'm willing to sit and wait and have that discussion. Whenever you're in a situation with a bunch of strangers that are all coming together and you've got everybody's traumas in the room, there are people who are doing what's called predatory listening. And it's not necessarily that they're trying to be a predator and hurt somebody else, but it's like they're waiting and filtering for who's going to hurt me. And as soon as they see even a glimmer of it, they're ready to blow, right? Because they're sitting there with their historical trauma and all their hurts. And that's why it's really important, I think, to do the groundwork with groups, to get to know each other, to build trust, to do the diversity training, the community agreements. Whenever you're bringing new people together, there's always the risk of that. So at least what you can do is create some community agreements that we have an agenda that we need to stick to. And if something arises, we're going to stay at the end and we'll talk about it. You can try that. If the agenda is not that tight, if it's not that rigid, if you don't have an urgent issue that has to be decided on or acted upon, then maybe you can take the time to address it with the group. And that is part of your process of getting to know each other. But it's a good question. And I'm giving you sort of the Cliff Notes version. We actually have like a half-day training just on that issue, on how to facilitate groups when these things arise. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Karen. So when you're calling in, here's sort of the do's and don'ts, and I'm going to give you all a scenario to try out and a template to use. You do want to need to be, I'm sorry?
Sorry, just before we go on, could the interpreters go ahead and switch?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, 1 second, Karen's just pinning me to her screen.
Okay.
Deborah, I have to leave. I just told everyone in the chat room, but I'm going to try to come back at the end.
Great, wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for letting me know, Julia.
Did you bring me a bag?
Okay, are we all good to go?
Deborah, can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Before you go, is there any tools that you use for a person who may be a predatory listener to spot them before they, any body language or whatnot?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we hold that to the end?
Oh,
Can you stay on
absolutely.
and we'll talk about it?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm one of those people, actually. I'm a predatory listener. So I'm happy to have that conversation with you. All right.
think
So
I
what we
am
want to do
too.
is we want to name the behavior, and we don't want to add a lot of other things on. We just want to sort of say, this is what I saw, or this is what I heard, and then explain what you think was problematic about it. This is why I think it wasn't okay. And then you can do some empathy statements, because I imagine that this person felt like this, or this is how I felt when I heard you say that. And this is what it brought me back to. And these are my experiences of pain or of not being treated with equity or discrimination that your comment kind of brings up for me. And I'd like to hear what you think, and I'd like to, give you space. I want you to think about it. I'd like to hear what's going on for you. And you can encourage people to make amends, encourage people to do redos, encourage people to have other conversations. But as you're doing this, you want to be modeling positive behavior. You want to be sort of acknowledging that, yeah, I've gotten it wrong too sometimes. But I want to hear what you're thinking, and I want to know what your intentions were. But you want to let people know what the consequences may be. Like, if you keep doing that, I think you're going to alienate certain people. Or if you keep doing that, I'm going to need to keep a distance from you because it's painful. And if I'm your boss, there will be consequences. Like, I expect you to change that behavior. And so this is going to get written up if it doesn't change, right? And depending on the severity of it, this might be our goodbye conversation, right? So if there are reasonable consequences, you need to let them know in that moment what they might be. And then you can just refer them, if it's appropriate, to helpful information, to training, to articles, to where they may get some more information. But what you don't want to do is normalize the harm or minimize its impact or make excuses like, I know you were having a bad day, or yeah, everybody says that, or, oh, it wasn't such a big deal, I'm sure she's heard worse, right? And you certainly don't want to blame or judge the target, like, oh yeah, he's just sensitive, or yeah, he brought it on himself by dressing like that. You don't want to make those kinds of excuses. And you also don't want to do unrealistic ultimatums. Like, some people in my family will sometimes say things that upset and bother me. I'm not going to say to them, I'm never going to talk to you again, because realistically, they're my family. I am. But I try to come up with what might be realistic. And I don't want to mirror the harmful behavior. I don't want to use language or insults that make me become exactly what it is that I'm critiquing. So we have a template, and I put it in the chat box for you. So the first thing is, I always say to somebody, is this a good time? If they're busy, if they're getting ready to go, if they've got a screaming baby in their arms, that's probably not the right time. I want their attention. And then, so here's your simple template. This is what I heard or observed. This is how I experienced it to be. Like, I experienced when you said it to her like that, I felt the ouch of it, I don't want to just say like, oh, she's sensitive to her. I want to say like, that conflicted with my values, because I'm sensitive to realizing that these comments are biased, that these comments create power imbalances. And then I give a little context, because if you keep doing that, it'll make somebody feel like othered. It makes people feel that they're not welcome. It makes people feel that they're on the margin. It keeps the power making in certain people's hands. It keeps some people from being included. So what is the impact, right? If we don't address this, people aren't going to trust you, or you're going to always just be surrounded in a white bubble, or with your guy pack and keeping the women out, or we're not going to make people who are trans feel safe here. And then there's the listening, like, what was your intention? Because sometimes people did have a reasonable intention, and sometimes they really didn't. What's going on for you? Like, what were you thinking of feeling in that moment? What were you hoping to accomplish? How are you feeling about me talking to you about this? Are you okay with this? Can we sit with this conversation? Do you need a little time to think about it? Do you want to come back to me? Yeah. Do you want to check in with so-and-so about it first? Right. And then sort of think about, well, what might be some good next steps? But to do this in a way that isn't yelling, that is as calm as you can possibly muster, that is respectful as you muster, and letting them know that you're valuing them. You want them to be there. You want them to be part of the group. And you would like to sort of steer them a little bit, or encourage them to empathize, or to sort of broaden their awareness. So coming back here to this situation, we had Nia and Dana talking about Black History Month. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This wasn't the Black History Month. This was the previous scenario that we did. Remember, we did last week that we had Dana, who's on the right, saying those kids are thieves. They're stealing extra lunch bags. Do you remember that scene? And there needs to be consequences for them. And Nia last week said, oh, I'm glad you brought this to our attention. You know, I didn't realize that some of our kids had food insecurity. Let's think of some solutions, right? So Nia just immediately went into modeling and to reframing it last week. And she offered a group discussion on what can we do to address food insecurity with some of our children, right? She didn't at all criticize Dana for her comment. But now she gets her in private, maybe a day later, and says, is this a good time for us to speak? Yesterday during the meeting, you referred to 2 of our children as thieves for taking extra lunch. That concerned me because Black and brown children are so often stereotyped as criminals. Putting them into that box can make other people see them in a negative way. If we punish children for being hungry, we might miss the opportunity to find solutions. I'd like to understand what you were thinking. So there's the template. This is what I observed. This is how I felt about it. This is the context of why it concerned me. And this is what I think the consequences could be, but I'd like to hear what you're thinking. So then Dana says, yeah, I guess my comment was harsh. I just felt frustrated that twice now Yolanda and Amani didn't get lunch because the boys took extras. It wasn't fair to the girls. So now we get to see like, oh, Dana was actually cued into these 2 girls who didn't get their lunch bags because 2 of the boys took extras. So now we're seeing actually maybe Dana had some good intentions. She was just trying to make sure that the girls aren't going hungry, right? But she's recognizing that her comment was harsh. So now Nia can come back and say, oh, okay, well, it helps me to understand your intention. So let's figure out how to deal with the food issue, right? And how can we make sure that if these boys are having food insecurity, what can we do to address that? What can we do to make sure that the girls are getting their lunch bags? But she adds, but look, I have an article I'd like you to read about the school to prison pipeline, because Nia is still sensing that there's a little bit of bias in there. She was so quick to using language about penalizing these boys and giving them consequences and referring them to thieves. Even though she had a good intention, there was some bias that Nia was sensing. So would you be willing to read this article? And then she can go back and talk to Dana about this article. So did you see how, even though you had a good intention, there's still that way that we look at Black and brown children as being potential thieves. We're so quick to want to punish them, right? And what are the consequences of that? Well, the school to prison pipeline, look at this awful data, right? So how can you maybe think about your intention, but addressing it in a different way and using different language, right? And different framework. So what I'm going to ask is, we're at 11:33 now, and I wanted us to have time to do our healing meditation, but I want to give you all actually an opportunity to try this out. Can I get a sense from you of hands, maybe, who can stay on for an extra 10 minutes today? We were going to go to 11. We were going to stop the training at 11:30 and then do the meditation till 11:45. Can folks stay till noon? Can I see some hands if people might stay till noon? Okay. So it looks like we have some folks who can stay. That's great. And if you need to pull out, I completely understand. And I'm sorry that we went over. All right. So here's our scenario. We started last week with this scenario about Brian, who's 6 months into recovery, and he says it's stressful being at home. My staff keeps asking me when I'm going to open the shop again. No one's blaming me, but I feel guilty that they're not getting paid. I tell them there's nothing I can do about it. China dumped this problem on us, and we don't want any of us getting the Chinese virus. What can I say? I'm dealing it with the best I can, watching Fox News and staying informed. From the facial expressions of others in the meeting, you can tell that there is discomfort. So last week, we practiced the indirect strategies. You talked about, all of you gave suggestions about responding by saying, oh yes, the COVID-19 is really a problem. And yeah, really hard on business. And yes, coronavirus is really impacting all of us. And boy, that's hard, you know, knowing how to handle your staff. You all sort of gave some really good ways of reframing it, using different language, modeling good language. But now what I'm going to ask you to do is to imagine that the meeting is over and you don't want that to happen again. You're not sure if Brian picked up on your hint because you were being subtle, and some people miss the subtleties. And if he's listening to Fox News and hearing them screaming about the Chinese virus, that may be what just sticks in his head. So you're going to try to have a call-in time with him. So you're going to go to your breakout groups and you're going to imagine that you are alone Brian and you want to call him in. Your goal is not to shame him or humiliate him. You want him to stick with your group. You want him to stick with his recovery. You recognize that he's new to the social justice language. He may not have ever heard it before. So your goal is to call him in. So if you can, with your group, break out and have a little practice using the template that's in your chat box. This is what I heard. This is how it made me feel. This is why I think it's a problem. This is what I think the consequences may be if it continues. And then what are you going to listen and how are you going to work through this? All right. So if everybody could take maybe 8 minutes with your group and then come on back. Use your chat box for the template. How you doing, Marion?
Talking about Lyme disease now. We're talking about a pandemic. And so he kind of gave me some tips on that. So it was pretty interesting.
And nobody's criticizing people from Connecticut or banning them from
exactly
from participation, right? Isn't that interesting how racism works, right?
You know, I didn't even know that it was from Lyme, Connecticut. And it's like right next, I actually went to school in New London and I didn't know that. So
Mark, I'm going to ask you a question. How did it feel doing the calling in?
Calling Brian in?
Yes, how did that feel?
Well, actually, what we was looking at is that Brian, he was already stressing, and we looked at gathering more information to you know, before we can look at his behavior, we got to understand where he was coming from. And then once we understood what he was coming from, let him know how that particular language can be hurtful. And then trying to encourage him to, you know, rephrase that and amend some of the things that he said. So that felt great. Being able to help him process what he actually did. But he was under stress, so we have to understand that too. Yeah, recognizing that stress and having that compassion for the stress that leads somebody to maybe their smaller mind can be a really, really critical way. And if people don't think that you're empathizing with them, then they can be really shut down and defensive. How about you, Karen? How was that for you?
I actually have to go.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We're running over. Thank you for being here with us.
She gone?
Okay. All right. So let's go on to our last little quick thing for today, which, well, we're not going to have time to fully do this, but this is just the person who's been hurt. If it's not you, you might want to do the same thing, is to get them alone and say, is this a good time to talk about what happened? They may be holding it together and trying not to cry and trying not to scream. So they may not want to talk about it right then and there. You might say, okay, do you want to schedule a time to talk about what happened? Because, you know, I want to be here for you and I want to check in. But after a microaggression or bias happened, they might just be like feeling very vulnerable and not really ready to talk about it. So don't force it on them, right? I know sometimes white people and wanting to be good white allies, we kind of put things in people of color's face. Like, did you hear about another unarmed shooting, you know, da, 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 da. And maybe they don't want to talk about it then and there, right? So check in first. Is this a good time? And then this is what I heard and observed. And I want to see how you're feeling and what you think and what you need. How did you experience it? And then what can I do to be supportive? Not like, this is what you've got to do, or this is what I'm going to do, but really engaging allyship is checking with the other person and listening to them and letting them have their experience and not superseding your experience over them, which sometimes we want to do to prove how woke we are, that we get, you know, to prove that we're angry and that we feel it too. Sometimes we can be overbearing. So recognizing that, you know, people need their time to be able to process what they're feeling and how they want to handle it. And so this is something that we're just going to look at together for a moment. So this I've been getting, you know, we've been doing different trainings in different places, and we've heard a few different variations of this shared with us. So this is sort of an amalgamation of 3 or 4 different scenarios that folks in the last 2 weeks have shared with us. that as an icebreaker, people have been encouraged to talk about how they're being impacted by the virus. And after everybody has shared, there's a little breakout conversation. And Alice tells Gilberto, it's BS that they're not giving you time off at the grocery store. You're going to get yourself sick if you keep going to work. And how are you going to feel if you get your grandmother sick? She's living with you now. So you should be thinking about her and your newborn. I mean, I'm going stir crazy working from home at the computer all day, but at least I'm keeping my family safe. If I were you, I would just quit. So we know that there are people who are out there on the front lines, right? We know that there are people who can't work from their homes, that there are people who are going out. And we've been seeing in the news and in the data and the reports that disproportionately people of color are in the positions or in the jobs that keep them on the front lines, right? And so a few different people of color have sort of shared with us that they've gotten this kind of response from middle class people, from white people, even from other people of color who have a job that allows them to work from home, forgetting sometimes that people can't afford to just quit their job, right? That people have responsibilities and families to take care of, right? So we could think of all kinds of ways that we might jump in and redirect, that we might jump in and model if this were in a group situation. But just imagining one-on-one, if you were alone now with Alice and you were going to call her in, what might be some things that you would say to Alice in this moment? Just you're alone with her. This has already happened. She's already made these comments to Gilberto in front of other people. What might you say to Alice one-on-one if you were to call her in?
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, Angela.
Okay, great, thanks. So, and I did have a little experience with this a week or so ago, and what I said was, people are really experiencing this pandemic in very different ways. And we started to talk about the different ways people were experiencing it. And so it was a broadening conversation, like, oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. We could say, people are experiencing financial anxiety, health anxiety, and just open it up.
So that's examining. That's like, let's look at the issue. Let's look at how people are experiencing the virus. Great. That's definitely one good way of doing it. Yes, great. If you're going to call her in, though, and sort of talk directly about some of her comments, what might you say? Anybody?
Well, I would ask her to put herself in Gilberto's shoes and look at what he may be faced with and what he's going through. And have you ever thought about some of the things you're saying, how that is making him feel, around everybody, but definitely putting herself in his shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. My job it doesn't allow me the ability to work, from the comfort of, home at my computer. So, this is the way that I found. What do you suggest, right? So we're kind of want to hear, but respectfully, as opposed to like you just telling me.
Empathy.
Right.
Yeah. Encourage empathy.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to say, this is how I felt when I heard you say that, what might you say? This is how I felt when I heard you talking to Gilberto about that.
I would say, for me personally, when I heard you speaking to Gilberto that way, I felt attacked and sorry. I mean, and so I put myself in Gilberto's shoes, and I felt perhaps I wasn't being acknowledged for my position, but also for maybe some of the steps I am taking to protect my grandmother and my newborn. So, again, encouraging Alice then to maybe ask, what else might you have chosen? How might you have found out what, more about his situation?
Great. Excellent. Now, if you were to have a direct conversation with Gilberto afterwards, you were one-on-one with Gilberto, what might you say? To engage in allyship.
I see that this is really a challenging and creating, some discord, at home. What are some of the ways, what have you thought about, that you can do to improve upon your situation?
What if you want to show allyship to Gilberto based on what Alice just said to him?
you might share some lived experience
Mhm.
yourself about something you have done that's very similar. Well, I remember a time, and this is how I was thinking about it, and I said, you know what I mean? So it doesn't feel so alienated.
But you're
During,
making it about yourself now. How do we keep it on Gilberto, not making it? So going back to that template, let's just go back on, can I do that? Engaging in allyship. What might you say to Gilberto?
I think it's important to find out what, if anything, he felt. You don't know the relationship he has with the person who was coming down at him. It might have been somebody that loves him to death and hits him with intensity because of that, and it registers in his mind as nothing more than this person overly being concerned. You don't know if he's hurt or not.
Yes, I want to check in to see your feeling about what just was said. I heard that conversation. Just want to check in and see how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how did that register for you?
And Deborah, this is something nobody has never experienced before. So this is a new experience for everybody. So to try to find something personally in my life to relate to, there is none as far as this particular situation. However, there are other people who are similar situated that are going through the same thing.
Yeah, so maybe something like, like I realized that for a lot of people are in the situation where you're not sure what to do. You need to keep your job. You're trying to feed your family. You're trying to be responsible, and this is a new situation, and I recognize that, that you're really trying to take care of your family.
Right.
By going to work.
That you're trying your hardest,
Yeah.
I love the question at the end, Deborah, though, too, where you can say, hey, is there, a way that I can be supportive? If they do express there's some concern there. I really love that, really coming alongside.
Because if Gilberto says, I just feel like I was totally trashed in front of everybody and like put down by this like middle-class white woman who has no idea what my life is like. And she just like trashed me and put me down in front of the whole group. Like if he says something like that, that might have been his experience. Or he might have felt like, nah, I love her. We're close friends. I know she just cares about me. She's just looking out for me. You don't know, but that's why they're asking. Like, how did this feel? How did this register for you? And what do you need? What can I do to be supportive? Do you need me to come back in front of the group and just say, I just want to say to Gilberto and everybody else who's on the front line, like, I appreciate that I have food on my table because you're working at the grocery store. And I appreciate that you're taking huge risks that I don't have to take. And what can I do to support you? What can we all do to support you? Right? Maybe that's what maybe that's what he would want and need. Like that kind of,
Oh, you just gave us an idea. He's very important. Because if there wasn't people listen, if there was nobody at the grocery store, who was the lady who was saying all the stuff to him? Alice wouldn't have nobody to actually to be able to deliver the food to if she went to the store. So this is important. What it is dangerous where he's at, but letting them know that he is someone who's very important.
Right. Right. So, this is why though having these conversations and engaging in the dialogue allows us to get there. We might not get there right away. As we were talking about last week, you might hear something that might just register in your gut is like, that felt a little uncomfortable, but I'm not entirely sure why. But I'm getting a feeling that the energy has just changed in the room and that maybe somebody's feeling uncomfortable. And, and so maybe I need to check in with them, or maybe I need to say something kind in the moment, right? So this is going to lead us to our final wrap up, to our last exercise, which is to understand and recognize that so many of these things are emerging. So many of these things we weren't taught, we didn't know how to deal with. We don't always know where anybody else is coming from. Frankly, we don't always know where we're coming from, In any given moment, something happens and we have to respond quickly. And some of us process quickly and some of us don't. And we're trying the best we can. And sometimes we might change our mind or we don't know what to do. We don't know if the right thing is to do. And these are ways that we've all been hurt. And these are ways that sometimes we hurt each other intentionally or unintentionally. And these are the ways that we sometimes hurt ourselves intentionally and unintentionally. So we at Human in Common are developing this year-long training called Healing and Interrupting Racism. And trying to heal from something that's still happening is really hard, right? Like if somebody is still stepping on your foot, how do you heal from that, right? So And if bias is always raining down on you, you know, how do you deal with that? And so I came up with this meditation that I do for myself, and I want to share with all of you. And some parts of it are useful for me all of the time, and some parts I need to just ignore today, like I can't listen to that piece today. But I'm going to invite you all to try this out and see if any part of this resonates for you. And I'd love your feedback and hear, you know, what this was like for you afterwards. So,
Deborah,
yeah.
If I just wanted to just add one point
Sure,
that we didn't talk about, just to backtrack for 1 second, is that because of what's going on, a lot of people's roles have changed.
Yeah.
And some people recognize it, others don't, and the people around us recognize, some do, some don't. So that's a big factor with all of this stuff, right? Because maybe like before, maybe he was, oh, I'm just working at the grocery store, but now you're like, you have this role that's uber important more than ever, right? And maybe people around him might not recognize that piece.
I appreciate you adding that, Paul. Yes, it's so true. That is so true. I think that we're all sort of feeling disoriented all the time. And I think we all have to wake up in new ways. I think this situation is requiring us to wake up to each other and to our world in new ways. And we're going to have to do that with humility and recognize that some of our belief systems that maybe served us in the past aren't going to serve us now. So racism hurts us deeply. It divides people. It destroys bodies and communities and cultures. It makes our world ugly, and sometimes it makes us ugly. Those of us who've been the direct targets of racism receive all kinds of messages about our social identities, our cultures, our bodies, our worth, our place in the world, our value, and the place and value of people like us, and the place and value of those who are considered to be the dominant group, the norm, the standard, that we're not. Some of us who have not been directly targeted by racism receive all kinds of messages about our social identities, our cultures, our bodies, our worth, our place and our value, and the place of those of us like us and those considered to be different from us. In order to survive, we've adapted. Some of our behaviors have served us and have allowed us to survive, but some of those behaviors may not have served us. And maybe they don't serve us now, or maybe they cause us pain, or maybe they're causing pain to others. Maybe some of our beliefs may cause us to look down on others. Maybe they cause us to feel shame or embarrassment. Some of our behaviors may cause us to exclude others. In our exhaustion and frustration, we may have made compromises that hurt others who were counting on us, or maybe we've hurt ourselves. In our exhaustion and frustration, we may have lost our temper with others who were doing their best or who were unaware. We may have not tried as hard as we could have. We may have not spoken up when we could have. We may have spoken up in a way that ended up being harmful or not as skillful as we would have liked. And at times we may have shut ourselves out to people. And at times we may have opened ourselves up to people who may have harmed us or others. And so we're all holding feelings, thoughts, and beliefs that may not serve us. And doing racial equity work requires stamina, and it requires us to love ourselves unconditionally. It requires us to forgive ourselves. It requires us to nurture our stuck places and our wounds, and understand our stuck places and wounds so that we can move beyond them. So what I'd like you to do is think of something that you would like to release. And it might be a painful memory that you hold on to that causes you to have resentment or to treat others with impatience or lack of kindness. It may be self-limiting beliefs. It may be something that you hold on that you tell yourself that isn't really kind to yourself. It may be fears or any kinds of emotions that are holding you back. So think of something today that you would like to try to release. And place your hand over your heart and take a few deep breaths. And you can repeat these things out loud or to yourself. Even though I have this issue, I would like to love and accept myself. Even if I'm not sure how to release it, I would like to love and accept myself. Even if I don't feel safe to release this thing, I would like to love and accept myself. Even if I don't feel worthy, I would like to love and accept myself. Even if I'm not ready to let go of this part of my identity, I would like to love and accept myself. Even if I decide not to let it go, I would like to love and accept myself. Any thoughts or feelings or belief systems or memories that you're holding in your body, I would like you to take a few breaths and imagine a distant island and think about what that issue is that you're holding on to that you think maybe isn't serving you anymore, that maybe is hurting you or maybe is hurting others. And as you exhale, see if you can send it away to that far distant island. Any issue that's related to it, any memory, anything that you've done, see if you can invite it to go away to that island. Just invite it to release. And setting the intention that maybe today it's not ready to be released, but that your intention is to release it. And any place that you're holding it in your body, as you exhale, just inviting it to release. And anything that's not ready to release, maybe you need to listen to. What purpose is it serving? What message does it want you to hear? What purpose is it serving for you? And take a few breaths. And I'm going to say a statement and you can restate it, you can change it. You could say it to yourself, you could say it out loud. And we just have a few more statements. I would like to release any anger related to this issue, including anger at myself. I would like to release any anxiety related to this issue, especially anxiety that's holding me back. I would like to release any fear related to this issue, especially fear that causes me to be unkind. I would like to release any guilt or shame related to this issue, especially guilt and shame that keeps me in the past. I would like to release any embarrassment related to this issue, especially embarrassment that keeps me from loving and accepting who I am today. And I would like to ask forgiveness for anyone I may have harmed related to this issue, including myself. And then if you believe in the positive power of words and intentions, I'd like you to set this intention for yourself that you're going to heal, that in time and when you're ready, you're going to heal those places that are hurt, those places that are resentful and angry, those places that lash out at yourself, those places that might lash out at others. That your intention is to become more skillful and more mindful and more self-loving and more peaceful. And that as you wish yourself peace, you wish peace to all beings. And that as you wish to become more aware, you wish that everybody would become more aware. More awareness in the whole world. And as you breathe in compassion, you're wishing compassion for everybody. And my cat is wanting me to let her out. And all of you are ready to go have lunch and move on with your day. So I'd love
That
to
was beautiful. Thank
hear
you.
a moment. How was that for you?
I wonder if we can start our meeting next time with that, because I mean, really, that was beautiful.
It was
Thank you.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all doing the best we can, and we can all do better, and we can all love ourselves more. And I guess for my wish for all of you today is to really love yourselves and hold yourselves in compassion. because you're all doing amazing work. You are all on the front lines in so many important ways, and what you're doing is beautiful and important. And what you do for each other and for the people in your communities is so beautiful and important. And it's such an honor to work with you.
Feelings mutual, Deborah. Thank you.
Okay. Much peace, all.
Much peace.
Much
Namaste.
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 Nothing but love. Recovery's real, everybody.
Recovery is real. Thank you, Marion. You're the best. Thank you for being with us, making all this happen. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.